Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jan Ślewiński. In a Christmas Eve address delivered under the shadow of continued Russian strikes, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy praised the resilience and unity of the Ukrainian nation. His words came shortly after another intense Russian attack against Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, which meant that for many, Christmas festivities gave way to a night of struggling to survive in darkness and bitter cold.
We are celebrating Christmas in a difficult time. Unfortunately, not all of us are home this evening, and not everyone, unfortunately, has a home. And not everyone, unfortunately, is with us today. Yet despite all the troubles brought by Russia, it is not capable of occupying or bombing the most important thing. That is our Ukrainian heart. That is our faith in one another, and that is our unity. And therefore, millions of us today will wait for the first star in the sky. I congratulate all of you on the holiday, dear Ukrainians, each and every one. I wish you a happy Christmas, tasty kutia, and of course, peace for all of us.
An 800,000-strong army, security guarantees for Ukraine, and an $800 billion reconstruction fund. That is the core of the 20-point plan for peace between Kyiv and Moscow, presented by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy following talks with the US delegation. The Ukrainian president also signaled the possibility of ceding control over some areas still held by Kyiv's forces. The plan is a slimmed-down version of the 28-point plan originally proposed by the United States back in November. The plan contains NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine, but makes no mention of the country's entry into the pact. President Zelenskyy, however, reiterated on Wednesday that Kyiv will not let go of its ambition to join the alliance. On territory, the plan envisages the possibility of Ukraine's forces ceding control over some areas, creating a free economic zone in the process. The plan will now form the basis of discussions between Russia and the US. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Wednesday said only that Moscow's demands are well known by now. Pope Leo XIV, celebrating his first Christmas since the election in May, urged Christians on Wednesday to welcome the poor and strangers, saying faith should be judged by how society treats those most in need. The 70-year-old pontiff also warned against treating people as commodities.
While a distorted economy leads us to treat human beings as merchandise, God becomes like us, revealing the infinite dignity of every person, even as human beings seek to make themselves God in order to dominate others. God chooses to become human to free us from every form of slavery. Will this love be enough to change our history? The answer comes when we remain with it, like the shepherds moving from a night of death into the light of new life, contemplating the child Jesus.
The US government has given more time to the Serbian authorities to negotiate the sale of the country's sole petrol producer. The company, NIS, has been sanctioned by the US and, as a result, is no longer supplying the country with fuel, forcing Belgrade to rely on costly imports. NIS has been sanctioned due to the company being majority-owned by the Russian energy giant Gazprom or its affiliates. Serbian authorities have been pushing Russia to sell NIS as quickly as possible to resume petrol production, but have refrained from taking more decisive steps like nationalizing the company. NIS operates the only refinery in Serbia. Due to sanctions and the resulting lack of oil supply, the facility has been forced to shut down production. The Hungarian oil company MOL is one of the contenders for the purchase, according to Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. Serbia has until the 24th of March to finalize the sale. The European Union has condemned the Trump administration's move to ban 5 European officials from entering US territory. The individuals in question have been at the heart of EU's efforts to regulate big tech companies to protect users from disinformation and hate speech. Washington, however, insists these actions amount to censorship, placing freedom of speech at risk and putting unfair burdens on America's tech giants. Sonia Gata-Biszczan has the story.
Former European Commissioner Thierry Breton and 4 other European nationals will not be spending Christmas in the United States. The Trump administration imposed a visa ban on those fighting hate speech and disinformation, accusing them of censorship, a move opposed by the European Commission, EU's top officials, German foreign minister, and the French president, to name a few.
France condemns the visa restriction measures taken by the United States against Thierry Breton and 4 other European figures. These measures amount to intimidation and coercion aimed at undermining European digital sovereignty.
In referring to the sanctions, U.S. Undersecretary of State Sarah Rogers described Breton as a mastermind of the Digital Services Act, a European law aimed at combating hateful speech and disinformation on online platforms.
20 years ago, this kind of sanctions used to be adopted by the United States and other actors to tackle individuals linked to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS. Now we are tackling EU-based individuals, including a former commissioner, just because they played a pivotal role in regulating or supporting the regulation of the EU digital space.
The U.S. sanctions follow a €120 million fine imposed by the European Commission on X for breaching its transparency obligations under the DSA, which prompted X's owner Elon Musk to call for the abolishment of the EU, with other critics suggesting the DSA curbs freedom of expression.
This is not about freedom of expression. This is about the EU telling big platforms that they can't ignore hate speech, that they have to be responsible in how they moderate content. And the big companies don't want to hear that.
We are talking about, in this particular case, about companies which are based in the United States. If they want to operate in the European digital market, then they will have to abide by the rules of the game, which the European Union requires them to apply. But calling this an exercise of censorship is absolutely disproportionate, and it's an act of manipulation.
Earlier in December, Trump administration moved to deny visas to fact-checkers and content moderators. Among the 5 most recently sanctioned individuals are also 2 British anti-hate social media campaigners. The UK government acknowledged every country's right to set its own visa rules, but added that it supports the laws and institutions which keep the internet free from the most harmful content. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
By now, we're all used to seeing drones perform elaborate light shows at various events. But what about using older machinery for the same purposes? In Finland, more than 100 tractors gathered to make a very unusual Christmas tree. The gathering took place in a small village of Tistenjoki, around 400 kilometers north of the Finnish capital Helsinki. The event was organized by a local farming equipment enthusiasts group called Komiat Traktorit, which translates into the handsome tractors. The tractor aficionados initially estimated about 50 vehicles would show up, but were pleasantly surprised when more than double that number arrived at the event. Over the years, Komiat Traktorit has organized many tractor-related festivities. 50 years ago, Poland set out into the icy unknown. A group of polar researchers spent Christmas at sea aboard 2 ships on the country's first Antarctic expedition. The voyage of the ships, the ZELENSKY'S and the Tsar, opened new ground for Polish science and inspired generations to explore a harsh, remote region that often brings people unexpectedly close.
Some bonds don't break, especially those formed in polar ice. They have everything it takes to hold. 2 professors, then young hopefuls in Polish marine research, shared a cabin on Poland's first Antarctic expedition.
Gdynia was unexpectedly left behind as the holidays drew near, and everyone's thoughts turned homeward, while ahead, an incredible adventure was just beginning.
Christmas of 1975 was unlike any other as they set sail from the so-called City of the Sea and Dreams on December 22nd.
I had just recently gotten married. I had a small child, and of course, it wasn't easy. But the emotions stirred by my very first voyage overshadowed that, and I didn't dwell on it too much.
Back then, a socialist country, Poland came under economic pressure due to fishing restrictions imposed on the bloc. Researchers teamed up with trawler Tazar to test new fishing grounds, guided by a trailblazer, Professor Rakusa Suszczewski,
who at that time was truly for us a person who had trampled over Antarctica several times. I laugh when I say trampled, only because Staszek had been at different stations at several different times, both Russian and American. He knew Antarctica firsthand. This region boasts extraordinary environmental conditions. Remember, the ocean near the continent is at minus 1.8 degrees Celsius. Minus. Vast areas, home to rich flora and fauna. Adaptations here are completely unique. For a biologist, being fascinated by this is only natural.
The expedition served as a stepping stone towards Poland's own polar station. The first telegram from King George Island came on February 26, 1977. The flag was raised and Poland earned a vote in the Antarctic Treaty System as the 13th nation. But it was Siedlecki and Tazar that paved the way along Europe's coast, across the Atlantic, past South America, with a stop in Uruguay via the so-called Gateway to Antarctica.
We crossed the Drake Passage as if on a flat surface. Everyone was surprised. The storms began near the Scotia Seas Islands area, close to the Shetlands, and there we had a really big storm. Winds reaching 160 kilometers an hour. I remember the ship's steel plates trembling, not from the waves, which weren't big. The low-pressure system was moving rapidly, flattening the waves, but the wind was incredible.
Each mile carried them further from the familiar and closer to the unknown, where the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary.
We made excellent caviar from some fish. That caviar was hardly inferior to sturgeon caviar. It was that delicious.
The research ranged from biology to meteorology, but one focus stood above the rest: krill.
It's a crustacean that exists in unbelievable quantities in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica, which by itself is only about half the size of a finger. And when you have tons of this animal pulled onto the ship's deck in such a short time, that really was something.
The studies enriched world science and inspired those much closer to home.
Various connections between these different marine species are what interests us. And my daughter became interested too. So, to this day, we work similarly on the same crustaceans.
Their adventure was about more than just science. It was about moments of victory and camaraderie.
Alongside us at the wooden pier in Grytviken, a Russian vessel was anchored. We played a soccer match with them. Guess what? We beat them 5-0.
Polar researchers gathered to celebrate a milestone that connects generations explorers from down south and high north.
The goal was to collect as much material so it would last as long as possible, so that diversity was the first priority, then ecology, the connection with the environment. And in fact, those things haven't changed because we still want to study them. Now we can relate things to research from 30 or 40 years ago, which allows us comparisons with conditions recorded before our currently intense climate change took full hold.
All began with a group of researchers bound by ice and driven by wonder, who have since paved the way for Poland to expand its own research capabilities.
And that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Please stay with us here on TVP World.